Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 752 for the 5th of March 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you once again from the Bay Area, San Francisco, California. Now, one of the marvelous things about visiting this area is occasionally I get to go to the Chabot Space and Science Center and meet up with my old friend Leonard Tramiel, and that's exactly what I did a few days ago when the planets Venus and Jupiter were very close together in the sky from the perspective of Earth. So I went along to the Chabot Space and Science Center, peered through a telescope, and saw these beautiful planets. And that report heads this episode of the Skeptic Zone, with thanks to Leonard for a fascinating experience. After that, it's You Can Count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill, and Adrienne chats to Jonathan Jarry. Now, Jonathan has been on the Skeptic Zone before, just before the pandemic, I think, where he talks about ear candling, ear candles and the dangers of ear candling. And Jonathan is from Canada, and he is a science communicator for McGill University. A fascinating interview with Jonathan coming up, where you can learn about his perspective on communicating science and skepticism. And as a side note, this interview is so interesting that I put the extended interview up on YouTube. If you want to hear the extended interview with Jonathan Jarry, head to this week's show notes at skepticzone.tv and you will see the link to the extended interview on YouTube. Following that, it's a wonderful little distraction, little diversion. I accompanied my old friend Dr. Eugenie Scott and her granddaughter to a wonderful place in Oakland, California called Fairyland, which is designed just for children. Nursery rhymes and little adventures and sculptures and little hills to roll down and swings and all sorts of things. And it's full of mythology. So Jeannie Scott looks at some of the myths and mythical things and nursery rhymes at Fairyland. Then to round off the show, it's back to the Trove archives, where this week we revisit the subject of superstitions, as reported in the Australian media going back decades, even centuries. So no matter where you are or what you're doing, what are you doing? A lot of people listen to the Skeptic Zone while they're walking, maybe walking the dog, maybe, as I do, go for long exercise walks listening to various podcasts. Maybe you're watering the garden. How's that going? I hope it's a nice, mild evening or morning, wherever you are. And no matter what you're doing, maybe you're on the bus, maybe you're in the car, maybe you're underwater, who knows? But now it's time for me to run downstairs, open the fridge. What's in the fridge? Oh, I think I'm going to have some cheese on crackers, maybe some camembert. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Marvelous room here. Well, it's a telescope really at the Chabot Space Center. Hello, Leonard Tramiel.
Richard.
What's the official name of this facility?
Chabot Space and Science Center.
I nearly got it right. I've been here a few times. You'd think I'd know by now. And you can probably hear the wonderful echo sound. We're in a telescope dome. I'm going to stand right here and oh my goodness. I feel like I'm in some sort of weird studio, but no, I'm in a telescope. It's the dome spun round. This wonderful telescope which dates from, looking at the brass, 1883. And this is a very exciting time to be here, Leonard, because you're telling me I'm about to look through this eyepiece and I'm going to see in daylight Jupiter and Venus in the one shot.
In one shot.
How often does this happen?
Rarely. Right. I've never seen it before.
Wow. All right, I better do it, eh? Let me see. Climb these steps up here. There's the eyepiece.
And they're at the extreme right and left edge.
Okay.
Venus is very easy to see. It's quite bright.
There it is, yes.
And then opposite it, quite
dimly.
indistinct,
There it is.
Jupiter.
There's Jupiter.
And you can see it's a little bigger than
Yep,
Venus.
yep.
And you can see bands.
Just
Barely.
Just barely. Glasses doesn't help much. I've got to take my glasses on and off. There it is. Oh, I've never seen the planet Jupiter in the middle of the day. Look at that. And I just squint my eye to the other side and there's bright Venus.
And if we wait another hour or two, they will have separated enough that they won't both be visible at the same time.
But you're telling me yesterday they were reasonably close together.
Yesterday they were about half the distance that they are now.
Wow. Oh, that's extraordinary. And this thing can tilt and turn to the exact spot where you can see both planets at the same time. And of course, these planets are nowhere near each other.
Well, as I said earlier, they're within 1 billion miles of each other. They're so quite close, astronomically speaking. So we point the telescope by using these setting circles, large metal discs with etching on them that has a bunch of numbers. And that is original equipment from 1883.
It looks wonderful. It's extraordinary. I mean, the end I was looking at, it's a modern eyepiece, I guess,
right.
But it's all brass fittings here. It's a beautiful sort of teal painted telescope. Oh, I don't know, maybe about 3 meters, 3 meters long, around that. And it's pointed up towards the east? Southeast, where the two planets are in the sky. You'd never know because in the middle of the day,
so
you don't normally see them.
It isn't quite clear enough today, but on a really nice clear day, if the telescope is pointed at Venus, you can sight down the scope and see it naked eye. But there's a little bit of haze today and the sky's kind of bright. So I can occasionally glimpse it.
Right.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, so I can see Venus.
So if you...
Only because I know exactly where and how to look.
Okay,
so give it a try.
I didn't know that. So I know it's in that general direction.
It's sight right down the...
So this is without the aid of a telescope, but I'm using the telescope to determine my gaze. You must have a better... understand. Yeah, there is a bit of a wispy cloud up there, so I would be lucky.
Try and focus your eyes at the cloud.
Okay. I'm doing my best, but I don't have the years of squinting practice. I guess you do. As more people come in to see what they can see.
This one is a little bit harder to look at. So actually, could you get down for a second? I'm going to move the ladder to make it easier.
So Leonard is here to aid people in being able to observe the stars and the planets. And as I said, it's most unusual to come in the middle of the day to be able to see these things. And there's a little kid now, maybe about 3 years old, 4 years old, peering down the telescope to see the planets.
And get this eye really close.
It's a wonderful thing here, the opportunity for people to come. It's a whole centre here dedicated to outreach and education and, of course, observing the universe, the stars, the planets that we can see from this vantage point.
Really faint gray dot. The range in people's reactions is just wonderful.
I bet it is.
I mean, it's everything from to just ecstasy. They're just wow! I saw that in the daytime. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised. I mean, Venus. Okay, I can sort of think. Yeah. Okay, through a telescope at daytime, Venus, but Jupiter's a surprise.
Yep.
As I look up through the roof, there's a lot more cloud coming over. So I was very lucky. I got here just in time to be able to see those two Planets. Another happy customer?
Happy customers are what we're here for.
I imagine when you're here in the evenings, the planet that gets the most gasps would be Saturn.
Saturn is spectacular.
Yeah.
People will often accuse us of faking it.
No, really?
Yeah, they go, all right, no, that can't be real. Is that real? Yeah, and they do not believe it.
Wow.
They're, and we'll joke, we got the Saturn slide in place.
Well, we're the Earth in relation to Saturn, it's always going to look good from our vantage point because we're near the sun compared to Saturn, aren't we? We're looking out towards it.
Right. What does happen every 30 years or so, every 15 years, is we will look at it from the plane of the rings, and the rings are so thin that they vanish.
Wow.
So you actually cannot see the rings. The rings are pretty tilted towards us at the moment, so they are quite obvious. But when it doesn't have rings, it's like Jupiter but duller. And doesn't have as noticeable bands. But with the rings, it's
and then so when people come here
showstopper.
and they want their money back, so that's not Saturn.
Well, fortunately, the telescope viewings are free, so that's not an issue.
How can people come here to this wonderful observatory and center and find out more, or where can they go online to find out more?
So the website is chabotspace.org. So just check that. It's in the hills above Oakland, California.
Yep.
And the telescopes are open for free public viewing every Friday and Saturday night, weather permitting, from 7:30 to 10:30.
Sounds like a great deal. Leonard, thank you once again.
You are most welcome.
Adrienne Hill here, and I'm really excited to announce I'm going to be heading to Sydney on March 14th, Canada time, and will be attending a Skeptics in the Pub on Thursday, March 23rd. Hopefully, I'll be over the jet lag by then, and I will be fully awake for my talk, which I have titled Skepticism and Syntax, Being a Wikipedia Guru with Giggles and Gumption. Join me to walk through my journey to becoming a skeptical activist, from my first behind-the-scenes work with the guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia not-so-secret cabal to snickering on the Skeptic Zone podcast. Join me for discussions on haunted houses, medical pseudoscience, psychics, and silly stories. Giggling guaranteed. And that's at the Occidental Hotel on Thursday, March 23rd at 6 p.m. in Sydney. Details can be found at meetup.com/AUST Skeptics. Hope I see you there.
You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill from Canada, and today I have a really special guest with me, a fellow Canadian from Montreal, Jonathan Jarry. Jonathan is a science communicator for McGill University's Office for Science and Society, or the OSS, and the co-host of the award-winning Body of Evidence podcast, which I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already done so. He is frequently quoted in local, national, and international media on issues of science and pseudoscience, and is a regular on CTV Montreal News. His subversive video about a fake cancer cure went viral and reminded over 14 million people to be skeptical. And Jonathan has been interviewed on the Skeptic Zone before on episode number 569 in 2019 about the dangers of ear candling. Jonathan Jarry, welcome back to the Skeptic Zone.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, that was in the before times. I do remember speaking to Richard, but it feels like so long ago.
It does, doesn't it? It feels like another century.
Indeed.
And to start things off, I would actually like to know a little bit about your story. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, when did you first become interested, particularly in science, and then maybe follow that with science communication?
Well, so my background is in molecular biology and human genetics, and I became interested in that. And also, when I went to university, the show CSI had started, So I became interested in using DNA evidence for human identification purposes. So I worked briefly in forensics. And so that's kind of what led me down this road of learning about DNA and how it's transmitted and how proteins are made and mutations. And so I've worked in a lot of related fields. I've worked in a clinical laboratory where we were using DNA testing to give doctors information on cancer patients and their tumors and if they would respond to this drug versus that drug, and looking at prognostic markers as well. And I've been doing science communication for perhaps a decade now, something like that. And I've been doing it as a career for, again, my perception of time has been warped by COVID, but something like 5.5 years at McGill, where we have a very unique office that is dedicated to separating sense from nonsense for the public.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I wish we had it all. I wish we had it all across Canada, because I think it's
all across the world. Think bigger. I mean,
bigger.
But the issue is always funding, right? The issue is always, well, who's going to fund something like this? Everybody realizes we need people to fight back against misinformation and against pseudoscience, but nobody, very, very, very few people want to fund these efforts, unfortunately.
I understand you didn't finish a PhD. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Why you didn't finish it? Was there a reason for that?
Yes, there's always a reason for something like that. And I'm part of a legacy of people who have started graduate studies and didn't finish them. I mean, I did finish my master's, but then when I went back to do a PhD, I did abandon it after 3 years. I passed my pre-doc exam. I was doing well, but the issue was, and it really triggered me starting to do science communication and why I do science communication, which is that I started to notice issues with how scientific research was being done. We tend to put science up on a pedestal, and it is the best tool that we have to understand the world around us, but it is, at the end of the day, it remains a human activity. And so there is corruption and there are bad incentives in the system and there's corner cutting. There's all of these things. And it is important to understand how messy scientific research can be in practice so that when we see results on, being spread on Facebook, on Twitter,
or in the
we
news,
can have a better... Or the news, yes, especially, so that we can have the right frame of mind with which to think of these results.
I understand your approach to scientific skepticism has changed. And if so, can you explain how and why?
I think many of us who get into skepticism, we go through a phase that is not unlike adolescence, where we relish being the balloon poppers and saying, oh, that thing you believe in, it's BS, and here's why. And this thing you just said, that's a logical fallacy, and here's its name. And it's something that I've come to refer to as drive-by skepticism, where, there's a conversation happening online, and then somebody comes in and goes, that's a Dunning-Kruger effect, and they just drive away, and they feel like they've accomplished something. So, I went through a similar phase where I thought of skepticism in these very, very, very narrow ways, with no consideration to human psychology, no consideration to empathy, no consideration to persuasion, because I care about changing people's minds. If somebody has a false belief that is causing harm, I would like for them to change their belief. But if I treat them like they're stupid, they're unlikely to do that. Yeah. So I believe that I've become more empathetic and more compassionate in my skepticism over the years. And I've tried in my writing also to be more compassionate and to not sound like a butthole, essentially. And I mean, there are limits to that, because whenever you are traipsing over somebody's very deeply held beliefs, there are people who will still accuse you of being closed-minded and being arrogant. That is bound to happen. So there is this problem of sort of limitless empathy that is required from some people. But overall, I would say that you do reach more people when you're being kind than when you're just being very kind of adolescent and you're thinking about skepticism.
I am a GSOW editor, or Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia editor, under the leadership of our friend Susan Gerbuck, who says hi.
Hello, Susan.
And my eldest son actually said to me once I got involved in the project, and he has leveled out. He doesn't do all the the same thing.
He's mellowed out.
He's done that. He's gone through that adolescent stage you talked about. Right. He has mellowed out. And one of the things he stated to me was that the GSOW project is one of the most important things we can do as activists. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think it's an important thing to do? Or are there other things that we could be doing?
I think it's very important in the sense that Wikipedia is one of the most visited websites there is. And so if you have the choice between starting something brand new and hoping to attract an audience or going to where everybody is going and making a difference there, it makes absolute sense to focus on a website like Wikipedia. Absolutely.
It would be nice if more people did become active. Can you suggest some ways that people can become active, obviously besides the Wikipedia project that I just discussed?
Just sharing good information among your social networks is already a good place to start. I mean, we saw during the pandemic this tsunami of misinformation, and people like me can't reach everyone. You know, we do well with the articles that I write for McGill. I have a podcast. I'm also with the media a lot. I'm on TV pretty much every week, and that's great. But I still can't reach everyone, and nobody who is sort of public facing in skepticism can reach everyone. And the thing is that, you have friends and you have colleagues and you have relatives that I don't know. But if you share the work that I do and the work that other people in skepticism do and the work that good scientists are doing within your own circles, that is great because that you're reaching people that the rest of us can't reach directly. So just that is already good. Something else that I've said a few years ago in a talk that I was giving is that I think journalists overall have become better at covering science, but there's still some really bad, very frothy, fluffy kind of coverage, and it's easy to just tag the journalist on social media and be like, this is a piece of trash, But if you want that journalist to learn something, then you may want to reach out to them in an email, for example, and say, hey, I read your article about this thing. What you may not have been aware of is that actually the science shows that blah, blah, blah. And here are a few papers. And if you portray the situation in this way, it can cause harm. And, feel free to reach out to me some more if you want to. I'm part of a local skeptic group, blah, blah, blah. That can make a difference. I mean, it did for me a few years ago. There was a journalist here who had written a piece that was had a lot of false balance about the use of vitamin C injections in cancer patients. And I reached out to this person, and that led to another piece that she wrote with my collaboration. And hopefully that sort of gave her a more scientific perspective on these issues.
So that brings me to the video, This Natural Trick Can Cure Your Cancer. And I believe it was 5 years ago that you released that. And that was terrific. And I actually remember...
In another life.
In another life, yeah. And I remember sharing it with people. I thought that was amazing. I'm kind of wondering, first of all, did you try to measure the impact of that? Was there a measurable impact?
For people who don't know, I made a video that we released through a lot of different accounts, and that was about 5 years ago. And it was this 1-minute video that was about this hidden cancer cure, this moss that some old white dude had discovered could cure cancer. But you wouldn't know it because Big Pharma doesn't like this. And then halfway through the video, I show that actually everything that you've seen so far is a lie. And there are clues that you should have picked up on along the way. And it became a reminder to people to be alert when they're online and to not simply believe a video just because it's got, flashy visuals and music and whatnot. It was very, very interesting. However, afterwards came COVID and we saw all the misinformation and people who believed it. All that to say that my video did not change the world. Yeah. I think, all of these little things, they do add up and they can make a difference, but it's not going to solve the issue of false beliefs and misinformation and pseudoscience. And it's to your question of, how can we measure its impact? We can't really. It's a question I've asked a very popular science YouTuber many years ago. And it's the same issue that, you can see the reach in numbers. You can get some feedback from people, but ultimately you don't know. You don't even know if people got the right lesson from the video than that you would have expected. So it's very hard. This is the idea that I've had that maybe YouTube for educational videos should give the option to content creators to put up a quiz after their video and then you fill out the quiz to see if you've actually learned something from that video.
Right.
So I don't know if that's something that would ever be deployed, but that would be interesting from the perspective of an educator who's on YouTube to see, okay, have they learned the right thing? Because just because you think that you've explained it well and because your audience believes it has understood the right message does not mean that any kind of actual teaching has occurred.
Right, exactly. And as a teacher, I certainly understand that. So what is up next for you? Have you got plans for something new or continuing what you're doing?
Pretty much continuing what I'm doing. It's already challenging enough because I do write a lot about, and also on the podcast, we talk a lot about bad science. And you don't want the public to become cynical of science because you keep focusing on the stuff that doesn't work or that has been poorly analyzed. We just published a piece on the Hawthorne effect, which was a fascinating dive into the history of that, because it's one of those things like the Dunning-Kruger effect that skeptics like to plaster over things. Oh, this thing over there. Oh, yes, it has a name. It's a scientific effect that we know very well. Boom, that's what it is. And we tend not to go back to the primary sources to see, is this effect even real? Has there been criticism of it in the scientific literature? It just becomes part of the gospel of skepticism. And I know that a lot of skeptics, they don't like accusations of scientism and of dogmatic thinking because they think that, no, we're all these critical thinkers. But very few of us go back to the primary literature on some of these psychological effects. And I did a bunch of articles about this maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. And I was really shocked to find out how little data there was on some of these effects that we like to prop up and say, yes, this is a true thing. Psychologists know about this. Well, this was done in 20 undergrads in California. So how generalizable is this? I don't know. The Hawthorne effect is this idea that when you're a part of a study, you behave differently because you're being observed. But even that is not the full definition. There are different definitions of it depending on who tells a story. And then what actually happened at the Hawthorne works in the 1920s and 30s is a fascinating history. There's a whole socio-political undertone that never gets mentioned. And so I will continue doing the work that I do because it's not just about informing the public on these really interesting scientific issues, but also even just skeptics and science communicators who may have taken some things for granted. And now I'm coming along and saying, well, I've been questioning this. Let's look a bit more deeply into this. Is this something that we should be saying?
So this has been really great talking to you, Jonathan, but how can people find you in your work if they haven't already done so?
So the work that I do for McGill can be found at mcgill.ca/OSS, not just my work, but the work of everybody who works at the office. The podcast that I co-host is called The Body of Evidence. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. I do have a personal website, which is just myfullname.com. It's mostly there for journalists who want to get an idea of who I am and what I've done. And I'm still on Twitter for now, at Cracked Science, although the website was misbehaving this morning. So who knows? It feels like the Titanic and it's slowly sinking. And at some point, I'll have to jump ship. But I'm still on Twitter for now.
Well, that sounds good. So, and I'm sure Richard will make sure to include all those links in the show notes below. So check them out. And what a pleasure it's been to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope we get to talk again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill signing off.
Are you looking for a science-based medical podcast to answer all your questions about health? Check out The Body of Evidence. Whether you're curious about the potential benefits of omega-3s or the potential risks of vaping, we take a look at the body of evidence to separate the noise, the hype, the lies from actual scientific rigor. We do it with comedy skits.
The only logical thing to do is for me to take off all my clothes and run into the street. No, remember the first rule of podcasting. Always keep your pants on.
With jingles.
Some are thrilled, some are not. You lose that hair if you stop propitiation.
And by, discussing what the evidence has to say on the topic at hand.
Orlistat is a pill, but yeah, it has the side effects of bloating, gas, and greasy stool, which makes it very unpleasant.
The Body of Evidence. Find it at bodyofevidence.ca or on your favorite podcast app. The Body of Evidence. Medicine that tastes funny and science made easy.
it's not the Muppet Show. We're at Fairyland in Oakland. Hello, Eugenie Scott.
Yes, we were at Fairyland with my grandchild, although that's just an excuse. You know, this place is very interesting. It's been around for 50, 75 years, forever. And they don't let you in unless you have a kid. So Richard and I are safe. We have a kid with us, a 3-year-old.
We do, and your lovely granddaughter is on. Look at her riding the horse on the merry-go-round. How sweet is that?
That's pretty great.
But you caught my attention just now because we're looking at the a little sign out the front of the merry-go-round here, and it's all mythical horses. Isn't that interesting?
I had no idea there were that many mythical horses. I know about Sleipnir, which is the 8-footed Norse mythological horse. I know about hippogriffs, which is a French mythological combination of a horse and an eagle, well known to Harry Potter fans, of course.
Right.
And of course Pegasus, which is the most familiar of them.
Well, you know what? My education is sadly lacking because I knew about Pegasus, but very few of these other horses in front of us. And they've even sort of got a unicorn tucked in there too.
I did not know that unicorns were from the Indus Valley region of India. Did you?
That's what it says. That's what it says here.
If nothing else, Fairyland is educational. We have learned about mythical horses. But now I'm going to take a shot at this one. This is from Hindu mythology. Shiravas. It's too many letters.
And the ride's just finishing up now, so I'll just move around the corner. Fairyland is an institution here in Oakland, California, and it's a wonderful place dating back decades, as far as I know, dedicated for little children. 5 and under, 6, 5, 4, that sort of thing. And it's full of fairy tales and stories and great ways for little children to have fun and learn all sorts of things.
You're very welcome. Bye, friends.
Was that fun?
Okay, I think we should check out the puppet show, Jonathan.
We've come to the wall of nursery rhymes. And odd sounds in the distance.
Well, usually you're worried about airplanes, but don't worry, you got toddler screeches, so you'll get all kinds of sounds here.
And your granddaughter is on the lam. There she is. She's just run down the hill.
There's a lot of folklore having to do with nursery rhymes, which sounds obvious, but there's the ring around the roses, pocket full of posies, ashes, all fall down.
I know variations of that. I know a tissue we all fall down.
Yeah. That's actually a very common variant.
Yeah. Eugenie's just running after her granddaughter. So I've come to the wall of fairy tales here in nursery rhymes. Here it is. Ring a roses, a pocket full of posies. Tisha, we all fall down. Tisha, Tisha? I think the writing is very stylized. I think that's what it says. The one I know and the one you might know is ring a rosies, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. And as far as I know, as far as I remember hearing growing up, that was to do with one of the plagues, probably the Black Plague. But I think Eugenie was just telling me that that's not the case. So if I wander around the magic land of Fairyland here with little houses and teddy bears and windmills and lots of toddlers toddling about, I might be able to find a little character at my feet. I might be able to find Jeannie and granddaughter when we get to the bottom of this folklore nursery rhyme. I found them. Granddaughter is going down the slide for the 12th time, I think. So I read the poem, very short.
Yes.
But you're saying, you're telling me it's not really to do with the Black Death or the plague or the bubonic plague or something like that.
That's the folklore about the folklore. Apparently, there's a lot of reasons to doubt that it actually has anything to do with plague or disease or falling down because you're dead and being buried.
Yeah.
There was a historian, of course, now that we're in the middle of a child's playground, I can't give you the chapter and verse, but I remember reading a historian's podcast where he really went into this, and it was fascinating. Because, you hear things that sound plausible, and the tendency for us, even as skeptics, is to say, oh, that's plausible, I'll believe that. But even the plausible stuff are not necessarily true.
That's true, yeah.
If you look at the actual evidence for the claim, the written version of the
I have no idea what it is.
Ring Around the Rosie didn't show up until like the 1880s.
Oh.
And so it doesn't, it's not terribly plausible that something would be in the oral tradition for like 600 years or something, because it's supposed to be 1300s.
Yeah.
That it would have remained in the oral tradition for that long without anybody noticing and writing it down.
So it could have been an invention far later than we thought.
Exactly. And like a lot of stories that we tell about stuff, if they're plausible, they're more likely to be believed. Now, there very likely are some nursery rhymes that do have some kind of basis in fact. So, of course, that makes the Ring Around the Rosie more complicated. But, the noble Duke of York, he had 10,000 men.
Yes.
He marched them up to the top of the hill, and then he marched them down
We
again.
all know that one, yes.
I don't know if that's actually a nursery rhyme, but it's oral tradition anyway. And that probably does have a basis in some war in the European theater someplace, which would be totally reasonable. Maybe old King Cole really was a historical person.
A merry old soul, maybe he was. Yes. I'm sure that there are a lot of stories attached to them, but I am interested in that Ring-a-Ring-a Rosies one. I might look into that further, and I'm sure listeners are now busily running to their Google.
As well they should.
As well they should, to check it out. Well, Fairyland is actually for children and adults. I must say it is a magical place. It's full of educational possibilities here for little minds, isn't it?
Really, it surprisingly is. In addition to kind of the usual motor behavior that you get in places where toddlers can run around, it's kind of, by the time a kid is 6 and definitely 7, they're pretty much not interested anymore. But for the toddler generation, it's just great. I took my daughter here, and now I'm taking my granddaughter here, and it's a lot of fun. And every once in a while, I take Richard here.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Hi, this is Susan Gerbic from GSOW. That's Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. I want to thank everyone who, via the Skeptic Zone podcast, has contacted me to become an editor on Wikipedia. Together, we have worked on or created thousands of Wikipedia pages with countless thousands of people from all over the world accessing those pages each day. In fact, we are approaching 200 million page views. Like many listeners, I also give back to the Skeptic Zone podcast via monthly micropayments, and I want to encourage you to do the same. Is the information and entertainment you get each week from the show worth $5 or $10 a month? I sure think it is. Just click the link at skepticzone.tv and show your practical support. Thank you.
Time once again to look into those archives at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, the seemingly endless resource of digitized newspapers, magazines in Australian history. And we've looked at so many things in the years of diving into this treasure trove. And one of the things we did look at some years ago was superstitions. And I think it's worth another look. I wonder how many of you, knowingly or unknowingly, possibly, are subject to superstitions. I am, sometimes, I think. Or is it a routine or a habit? I wonder what the definition is exactly. I wonder what the difference is, where that comes in. Might be a bit of a grey area, might be a bit of a spectrum, I don't know. Anyway, let's glance back through the decades and see what we can find, this time for superstitions. And we land in the year 1906 on the 11th of April in the Darling Downs Gazette from Queensland. Superstitions in modern medicine. How we cling to them. With all the scientific accuracy and coldness of modern medicine, there are not a few survivals holding their own today, survivals of ancient superstitions. The Journal of the American Medical Association mentions several which seem to hold good in actual scientific medicine, while popular medicine is, quote, full to overflowing of them, end quote. For example, in the former class, the Journal says, quote, there are plenty of reasonably intelligent people, including many lawyers and ministers of the gospel in this country, who will wear plain iron rings on their fingers, confident that somehow the electricity, which they have been told flows from this into their system, prevents the occurrence of rheumatic and nervous pains of many kinds. Faithfully, every second or third day, they rub out the interior of the ring when it has become rusted because of perspiration and congratulate themselves on the fact that they are wearing it because here is the actual evidence on the inside of the ring that it is drawing various forms of insolatory material out of their systems. Why a poultice works. Quote, this principle that something can be put on the outside of the body which will draw out evils from within has never lost its hold on the popular imagination, and, indeed, there are many physicians who apparently still cling to it. The poultice is still used by a great many practitioners of medicine with at least the subconscious idea that it will help to bring noxious materials to the surface. A poultice, according to our modern medical scientific principles, is nothing more than a method of applying moist heat to the body. It does not matter then, in the slightest degree, what the poultice is composed of, provided only that it is able to retain heat and moisture well for a reasonable period. There are many who will still consider that the selection of the material of which the poultice shall be made for various diseases is extremely important. A linseed meal poultice is used in pneumonia. An Indian meal poultice is preferred in peritonitis, while there are some who consider that for erysipelas or for red and swollen joints, a cranberry poultice is more effective than any other. These opinions are, of course, medical superstition, survivals of the time when the drawing power of the poultice was considered to be its main reason for use. There we are, a little bit of interesting medical superstition way back then in 1906. And now we'll travel to the year 1930 on the 7th of February in the Southern Record and Advertiser from New South Wales. Strange cures. Numerous, curious and ridiculous superstitions as to the method of preventing disease were believed in years ago and are not altogether extinct even today. Much ancient faith clustered about the mandrake root, which was carved in the form of a doll, dressed in fine clothes and kept in a box or coffin concealed in some corner of the house. Each month it was washed in wine and water and freshly garbed. Another universal cure was to carry a piece of mistletoe, which had been cut from a tree by a golden sickle, and caught in a white vessel as it fell. Metal scrapped from a church bell or a piece of the rope was supposed to have a similar protective influence against disease, as also a cloth stained in the blood of a murderer or the rope with which he was hanged. Ooh, some very strange superstitions there as recorded in 1930. Now let's go to the year 1926 on the 4th of February from the news from Adelaide, South Australia. Dark Age magic, superstitions retained, charms still carried. We still cling to the superstitions of the Dark Ages, according to the inaugural address to the students of the Victorian College of Pharmacy by Professor W.A. Osborne. The man in the street, he said, does not want scientific treatment by magic, stressing the need for accuracy, Professor Osborne said that if a chemist made a mistake, he heard of it again, and so perhaps did the coroner. We have taken 50,000 years to get to this stage, and we have still in our blood the old idea of the witch doctor, the blood ceremonial and magic he declared. He mentioned a successful Melbourne businessman who carried concealed about him a charm against rheumatism. Another man carried a piece of zinc in one foot and a piece of copper in the other as a preventative against gout. And finally, we will look at the advocate from Burnie, Tasmania, dated the 26th of April 1938. Queer charms and cures. And of course that word queer in this sense is the older meaning unusual or odd. Secret superstitions. Although cobwebs are an eyesore to the housewife, there are many who will not kill the little spider because it is considered, quote, bad luck, end quote, to do so. The little spider, known to most of us as a money spider, is lucky to have on one's body, and if you pick it up and throw it over the left shoulder, it brings good fortune. Maybe not so much for the spider, I don't know. If a bride has a spider on her clothing, it is generally considered the sign of long life and happiness, and spider mascots have been considered lucky for a bride to wear. In Sussex, England, girls picked the, quote, red breasts cushion, end quote, from the doghouse and believe by carrying this they will never lose their lovers. The little mossy cushion is the rose gall. Many people believe in the old world charm of a raw potato as a cure for rheumatism. It is said, though, to be really efficacious, it must be a stolen potato. Some people hold belief in a rheumatic ring, a plain gold ring with a ridge inside which they declare absorbs the rheumatism. So there you go, just a short selection there of some strange and old superstitions as recorded in the pages of Australian newspapers. And it appears to me, looking back, this was mostly from the first half of the 20th century. I wonder how far we've come since then. But you can see how far we've come since then and many other things by looking in the pages of Trove, and I encourage you to do so. The Trove itself is under threat of being axed due to lack of funding, believe it or not. And I hope it doesn't happen, because when you go to Trove, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Coming up on next week's show, Nostradamus. A few weeks ago, I was in a bookshop in Berkeley, California, thumbing through an old book about Nostradamus, and onto the floor fell a newspaper clipping from 1983, which was very strange. And it was a full-page ad for a book about the lost prophecies of Nostradamus. I was so intrigued, I went on Amazon, found the book itself from 1983, and next week I'll be looking at this book, as well as the 1979 TV special produced in Australia called The Prophecies of Nostradamus, which had me as something like a 13-year-old kid, not scared exactly, but I thought it was real. I thought this was a factual documentary. We're going to be looking at all that, plus what Trove has to say about Nostradamus on next week's episode. Thank you to all those people, not Nostradamus, apart from Nostradamus, who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal every week. It means the show keeps going, and I can talk about things like Nostradamus and whatever. And if you feel you get entertainment and maybe some companionship and education out of the Skeptic Zone, then you can chip in too at skepticzone.tv. Just follow the PayPal or Patreon link. $5 a month or $10 a month is really all it takes to keep the show going. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from not too far from the city of San Francisco. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Take two. Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill from Canada. Today, I have a really special guest with me. He's a fellow Canadian from Montreal. Woof, woof. Jules says hi. Jewel, come. What a good girl. Can you sit? Good girl. It took you a while. You gonna catch? Good catch. Good girl. You know I'm recording, right? So you're not supposed to be barking. I know. Somebody probably came to the door, didn't they? And you're protecting me. You ready? Catch. Ah, you missed. New dice game. Will the dog catch or not? Ha! Oh, Jewel. Somebody else at the door. I can't believe it. 2 people in a row. Oh, the joys. I guess I should pause this. Take 3. Here we go.